Coming up on Network Africa, about 400 people escaped from coronavirus quarantine center in Malawi's second largest city, Blantyre. In 24 hours, the number of coronavirus cases in Zimbabwe jumped to 132. Plus, the easing of the coronavirus-led restrictions offers no respite to tourism industry in Senegal. Thank you for joining us this hour. Welcome. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin our coronavirus coverage with the top figures from Africa. The continent has recorded 125,138 cases. From that figure, more than 51,000 people have recovered, and the death toll stands at over 3,700. South Africa has the highest number of cases in Africa with 25,937. It's followed by Egypt with 19,666. Then Algeria with 8,857. In West Africa, Nigeria has recorded 8,733 cases, followed by Ghana, which has seen 7,303 cases. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are Egypt with 816, Algeria with 623, and South Africa with 552. In Malawi, about 400 people have escaped from a coronavirus quarantine center in the second largest city of Blantyre after complaining about its poor state. Local media has reported that the escapees were quarantined on arrival from South Africa and were yet to be tested for the virus. They had complained that the stadium, which was turned into a quarantine center, lacked water, toilets, and also food. The Ministry of Health's spokesperson has confirmed the escape of the returnees and said that the authorities have begun a manhunt for them. Malawi has so far confirmed 101 coronavirus cases, including 4 deaths. We move to West Africa. In Ghana, a number of opposition lawmakers are proposing that the parliament be temporarily closed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Speaker Mike Kwaye last week told members of parliament and parliamentary staff to be tested for the virus before sittings resumed. The West African country has so far confirmed about 7,000 cases and 34 deaths. There are fears that members of parliament could be exposed to infections, and some lawmakers have proposed the introduction of virtual parliamentary proceedings as a stopgap measure. The country has conducted over 200,000 tests, and health officials say new data suggests a downward trend in infections. Well, Daniel Dadier is in Accra. He's a journalist with Joy News TV. He joins us now to discuss more on this story. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for speaking to us.
Hello, Layo.
Yeah, help us understand this proposal. Does that mean the parliament had been in session all this while?
So, Layo, Parliament in Ghana is structured. Their meetings are structured in this way. Every calendar year is a meeting. So this is the 4th meeting of this parliament, because obviously it's the 4th calendar year since they took over. Now, in every session, they have 3 meetings. So every calendar year is a session. And in every session, they have 3 meetings. They adjourned the last meeting some 2 weeks ago. And then the Speaker of Parliament said that this will be indefinite. This adjournment will be indefinite, pending the measures that government takes to fight COVID-19. On the 14th of May 2019, the Speaker wrote a letter recalling the members of Parliament to start the 2nd meeting of the 4th session. So like I said earlier, every calendar year is a session, and in every session is 3 meetings. So it's sort of like a term in school and a vacation. So they went on recess. They came back from the recess. Now, when they were coming back, the step that was taken was every member of parliament was required to take a COVID-19 test. It wasn't just members of parliament, it was also parliamentary staff. Now, reports that we heard indicates that so far, 2 members of parliament and 13 staff members have tested positive for COVID-19. After the results were leaked, because it seems like some senior members of parliament have confirmed this, though parliament as a house has written a statement that they haven't received the test results yet. So they cannot say for sure if someone has indeed tested positive for COVID. After this news leaked to the public, some minority members of the House suggested that the House suspend sitting for at least 2 weeks. Now, it has been suggested that maybe they move to digital forms of meeting, but at the moment, this is where we are live.
All right. In the light of these results that you say were leaked to the public, is this proposal from, the opposition members, is it likely to get approved and, Parliament will move to virtual sitting?
Well, the background is that the current government in power has a large majority in Parliament, and we often find that members of Parliament vote aligned to their political party. At the moment, the conversation seems to be split between the two parties, with the minority asking that sitting is suspended. Some members of minority, and some members of the majority actually arguing that it is not necessary since most of the country is open anyway. So we are still waiting to see if indeed this will be even considered by Parliament as a larger house. We go ahead.
About pool testing, that's one of the ways Ghana has, tried to keep the spread of COVID-19 under control. How effective, has this been in the country?
Well, it's been effective, Layo, in terms of getting as many people tested as possible. So I'm sure you know that Ghana is in the top 5 countries when it comes to tests per million in Africa. That means that we are carrying out a lot more tests than probably about, for the population that we have, that is, than probably about close to 50 other African countries. Now, what happens basically is they pour the samples together. They test 10 samples as one. And then if it's a positive test, they will test the 10 samples individually. If it's a negative test, it means all the samples are negative. They resorted to this because they realized that we have a very, very low positivity rate. That means out of a number of persons that we test, a very small number of them actually test positive. And that is reflected in the fact that we've actually tested over 100,000 people, and at the moment about 7,000 have tested positive. If you ask how effective it's proven to be in terms of detecting positive cases, well, experts agree that if you have a positivity rate of lower than 5%, that means it is best if you use pool testing. And so I guess that's what the experts chose. I'm not in a position to independently verify that. But in terms of getting as many tests as possible, yes, Lio, it's been very effective.
Yes, and health officials are also saying there is now a downward trend in infections, which is actually good news. But what are the authorities attributing to this success?
Well, the authorities will first of all point you to the enhanced surveillance, which means that when someone tests positive and they do the contact tracing, they don't just test. Sometimes they test persons in the neighborhood. Sometimes they go beyond even the contacts that were identified. They'll also point to the closure of borders, which was done very early, and the quarantine, the mandatory quarantine that persons who entered the country within a certain period were asked to go into. Of course, the numbers spike. They go through a spike every now and then. So, for instance, just last week or last 2 weeks, we had a super spreader, one person who infected about 500 people. So, at the moment, the trend in infections are going down. But if they are to go up again, it will not be the first time that we have been told that we have reached a peak of infections, number of infections per day, and we are not expecting it to go higher after that.
All right, then, Daniel Dadzie, Joy News TV correspondent, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Laya.
Well, we'll move to Southern Africa, where the South African Airways has said it does not have money to pay its employees their salaries for the month of May. About 5,000 employees have been on paid leave since the beginning of the month. The only money employees can expect to receive this month is the Unemployment Insurance Fund. The aviation organizer at the Solidarity Trade Union, Derek Mans, is quoted by Reuters saying, "Now, the team rescuing the struggling airline originally wanted to dismiss the 5,000 people staff." Well, 2 years ago, South Africa's first black female winemaker, Nsiki Biyela, watched anxiously as the worst drought in a century scorched vineyards in Cape Town, challenging her fledgling business, Aslina Wines. After surviving it, Biyela's business recovered and was poised for growth this year until the new coronavirus pandemic struck another blow.
The COVID-19 pandemic is threatening a bitter harvest for Nsiki Biyela's wine business as domestic and export sales tanked during 9 weeks of stringent lockdown in South Africa.
When I look at last year, we had actually focused on doing, we did about 70% last year on our exports. And then this year, as I said, like when we look at the total export for all our countries, currently we've just done about 10% in terms of the whole growth, including the local sales. So we need to push to get that at least another 30% to get to our 40% that we budgeted.
Aslina's woes reflect a broader struggle in one of the world's top 10 wine producers. According to domestic industry body Vinpro, it wasn't likely to make up for the nearly 300 billion rand in direct revenue loss during lockdown, with export losses alone amounting to 200 million rand a week.
There are very few businesses that can last without cash flow for so long. So to your point, unfortunately, there has been huge pressure financially, and the modeling that we've done with various independent companies show us that there will be huge structural changes, unfortunately. And now we're talking businesses that will probably liquidate.
Biyela is one of an increasing number of black entrepreneurs breaking into an industry traditionally seen at the preserve of wealthy white landowners who have thrived since South Africa produced its first wine in 1659. Aslina Wines, named after Biyela's late grandmother, who helped raise her in the rural village of Kwavutela on the east coast, was founded in 2016 and sells around 36,000 bottles a year, mainly to the US, Japan and the Netherlands.
Opening of the local sale is going to help us a lot. It's going to help us to see, because that's a quick cash, because people locally, they pay faster than the international market. So that's going to help us at least to have a little bit to run with. So it's going to help us actually to give us an idea whether we are going to be able to move forward and take our step forward.
In a lifeline to the distressed sector, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa this week relaxed lockdown restrictions to level 3 from June 1st, allowing the sale of alcohol for home consumption at certain times during the week.
In neighboring Zimbabwe, the number of coronavirus cases has more than doubled to 132 over the past 24 hours. The government says many of them are Zimbabweans who had returned from abroad, and only one case was a local transmission. More than 4,000 citizens have returned to the country in the past month and have been placed under mandatory quarantine for 21 days. However, Mr. Mangwana is quoted by the Sunday Mail newspaper as saying more than 100 people had fled and were being sought by security agents. Doctors in Tanzania have denied being overwhelmed by the coronavirus pandemic after a recent warning by the U.S. Embassy about the risk of exponential growth in cases in the country. The embassy said hospitals in the main city, Dar es Salaam, were overwhelmed and that the chance of contracting the virus was extremely high, but did not give any evidence to back up its claims. But the head of Tanzania's Medical Association, Elisha Osati, says that hospitals are operating as normal and that the majority of coronavirus inpatients are suffering from mild symptoms. Thanks for staying with us. Let's have some stories now outside the coronavirus pandemic. The United Nations says widespread killings, rapes, and other barbaric acts by militia in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo may constitute crimes against humanity and war crimes. It follows months of escalating ethnic violence in the province of Ituri. The UN says nearly 300 people were killed and nearly 40 raped between November and April, mainly by fighters linked to the Kodko rebel group who are drawn from the Lendu community. Earlier, the UN said at least 38 people had been killed in Ituri and neighboring North Kivu in attacks by another armed group, the Allied Democratic Forces. Now, the man accused of financing Rwandan genocide has denied playing a role in the massacres. Felicien Kabuga told a French court during a bail hearing that it was all lies, that he was working with Tutsis and not killing them. The 84-year-old businessman was arrested earlier this month in a suburb in Paris after 26 years on the run. His bail was rejected. He is alleged to have backed an armed ethnic Hutu militias who slaughtered about 800,000 people in 1994. Over 100 days, they targeted members of the minority Tutsi community and their political opponents, irrespective of their ethnic origin. In 1997, he was indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal, for Rwanda on 7 counts, including with genocide and crimes against humanity. The UN tribunal wound up its operations in 2015 and its duties were transferred to a body at The Hague that handles outstanding war crimes cases and is pressing for Mr. Kabuga's extradition. Well, back to more stories on the coronavirus pandemic. The easing of the restrictions offers no respite to the tourism industry in Senegal that is dependent on foreign travelers since they won't be coming there for some time. One hotel owner in a popular tourist spot says he is hoping to lure more local visitors soon to make up for the losses.
À Dangan, aux portes du Ciné Saloum.
In Senegal's Salom Delta, hotel owner Lionel Lopez shows us his guests' favorite place to enjoy a drink, but it's been months since any have been served. With borders closed, West Africa's tourism industry has been put on hold since mid-March, and Senegal is a vacation hotspot. Tourism accounts for about 4% of their GDP. Lopez's 15 employees have survived on a reduced wage thanks to an emergency loan from the government.
Countries where tourists come from have put in place restrictions. For example, France, which produces the most tourists coming to Senegal, clearly said people will go on holidays in France, so we won't have French people this summer. However, we are lucky to have an important customer base for the expat and the local community. We are waiting for the reopening on cross-region transport links in order to reopen the hotel. It is a good part of our income, 35 to 40%, and with that, we will be able to reopen properly, hopefully in a month's time.
But others are not so lucky. Across the Silence Lagoon on Madoj Island, women who used to earn up to $17 a day selling woven baskets and carved souvenirs are now struggling to support their families. Amy Doif is one of them.
We've not sold anything in 2 months in the village. That's our only work. Women do that and men work the land. With that, we can help out the family.
Even if international visitors are allowed to return soon, the over 2-month hiatus means tourist numbers this year will be far below the 1.7 million who holidayed in Senegal last year.
Or more Kenyans are starting to operate small businesses out of the boots of their cars to make ends meet as the coronavirus crisis has hit their jobs and the economy. The East African nation has over 1,000 confirmed cases of the COVID-19, and the disease has devastated crucial sectors of the economy like tourism and farm exports.
Boniface Mbugua, who lost his catering job, drives his car to markets to sell food to traders to make enough money to feed his children. Kenya has 1,286 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and the disease has devastated crucial sectors of the economy like tourism and agricultural exports.
My boss dropped me from work and I had to find something to do for my family since our hotels are not open at the moment. And with that forthcoming, I had to come here and start a business, start something small for my kids and something that I can get a few shillings for my family.
Those problems have spilled over into the transport sector, where Stephen Weweru's tours and travels business has struggled to get any passengers. This has forced him to start hawking avocados and bananas from the boot of his car. Weweru intends to continue with this venture even post-COVID-19 restrictions.
If Corona ends, we go back to our job. We will still do this job because it has helped us to get some food, our daily bread, and we appreciate.
Others like Anne Njeri, who used to work as a church administrator, says selling bananas from her car next to a busy highway is even more lucrative.
Well, back here in Nigeria, the Lagos State government, through the State Ministry of Education, have visited 200 students in their homes and presented them with gift items for their school performance. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu also made a special readout session to children stuck at home as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The COVID-19 pandemic has affected a lot of activities in the country, leaving the education sector paralyzed as schools remain shut to prevent pupils and students from being infected with the virus.
The celebration of the Children's Day.
And that's why the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, is educating the children on the need to stay safe in a special readout session in his official residence.
Mama, why do we wash our hands? And the mom, typical mothers, answered, I said, I wash my hands to remove dirt and germs.
The usual celebration, which takes place at the Agege Stadium every year, did not hold due to the pandemic. Instead, the Lagos State Ministry of Education visited 200 outstanding students in their various homes. Two of them are Deborah and Ayomide, who performed excellently in their studies.
We decided that, okay, let us select children that have excelled both in academic or co-curricular or sports in our schools, that we should select them and visit their homes to appreciate them.
They are grateful for such recognition.
It's a great privilege for Lagos State government to visit me and my family in my house.
Thank you for the gift you gave me. God Almighty, God bless you more and more.
Governor Sanwo-Olu also assures the children of resuming school very soon.
I want you to know that I'm doing everything possible to ensure that you resume to school as soon as possible.
The Children's Day event was rounded off with a performance from BJ Sachs in Alausa, Ikeja.
Well, we do pray that everything comes back to normal very soon. That's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.